There's trouble brewing in South Carolina, and it's just what the enemy wants. This is SkyWatchTV News for Friday, July 3rd of 2015. I'm Derek Gilbert. By the enemy, I mean the principalities, the powers, the rulers of this present darkness that the Apostle Paul warned us about. The Ku Klux Klan plans a rally in Columbia, South Carolina on July 18th. Almost 1 month exactly to the day after 9 people were shot dead in a racially motivated attack at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Columbia, South Carolina. And now a group linked to the new Black Panther Party says it will have a significant presence at this rally. It's a recipe for trouble, and it's what the enemy wants. Keep us hating and tearing at one another instead of loving and forgiving. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley says the Klan is not welcome. The annual UFO Festival takes over Roswell, New Mexico this weekend, the celebration of whatever it was that fell in the desert outside Roswell in July of 1947. Guy Malone, the man who organized the groundbreaking Ancient of Days Bible UFO conferences in Roswell several years ago, is there this weekend. And he says the people are there because they're looking for answers.
It's like a mecca, a once-in-a-lifetime journey for a lot of people. That they're either they're experiencers or they're just very curious and honestly intellectual. And they're looking for answers to those basic questions. Are we alone? What is our purpose in the universe? Because I found out over the decade and a half plus now, those questions, that what you believe and what about the answers to those questions affect your fundamental worldview and the way you approach everything, your life, your love, your eternity, your savings. But people, they're looking for answers, the ultimate life, to the ultimate questions of life, the universe, and everything. That's why they're here.
The Roswell UFO Festival runs through the weekend. In Detroit, the Satanic Temple unveils its statue, a monument to its god, the goat-headed Baphomet, representation of Satan. It was intended to be displayed on the grounds of the state capitol in Oklahoma, right next to the privately funded monument to the Ten Commandments. But earlier this week, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled that the Ten Commandments monument would have to be removed from public property. So a spokesman for the Satanic Temple says they're no longer interested in placing Baphomet in Oklahoma. Instead, they're looking at Arkansas, where the legislature has also approved a privately funded monument to the Ten Commandments on the state capitol grounds. That's the pattern of the Satanic Temple, using laws that protect religious freedom to try to tear down our Judeo-Christian heritage. They currently have 2 lawsuits pending against our state of Missouri, using the state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act to argue that Missouri's informed consent law and mandatory 72-hour waiting period before an abortion constitute an infringement on their religious rights. They argue that that Missouri law wrongly promotes a religious view that life begins at conception. And on a similar note, a group in Indiana is using that state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which went into effect Wednesday, to claim a religious right to smoke pot. You remember the media uproar when Indiana passed that law. It went into effect, as I mentioned, on Wednesday, and Wednesday night, the First Church of Cannabis held its first services in Indianapolis. Instead of marijuana, which is still illegal in the Hoosier State, church founder Bill Levin lit up a thick cigar, saying that the fight over the religious law would have to take place in civil court rather than criminal court. The concept that human life is sacred because we're created in the image of God is under attack. We talk about that frequently here in this program. And not just among people, by the way, who think that an unborn child is just tissue. The Canadian Medical Association has caved on the issue of euthanasia, assisted suicide. They have abandoned the Hippocratic Oath, from which I quote, "Nor shall any man's entreaty prevail upon me to administer poison to anyone, neither will I counsel any man to do so." The Canadian Medical Association has issued a set of draft guidelines for assisted suicide. And as Wesley J. Smith points out at National Review Online, these guidelines have no limits to which patients can be killed under assisted suicide. There's no mention at all that a patient seeking to die be suffering from any illness or any disability whatsoever. But this isn't surprising. This is the direction our culture is going. In Belgium, doctors have granted a mentally ill woman permission to die. A 24-year-old woman, identified only as Laura in the reports, told doctors that she's been depressed since childhood, entered a psychiatric facility there about 3 years ago. But instead of seeking to treat her, doctors have agreed to kill her. because apparently in our brave new world, death is an acceptable treatment for suffering of any kind, even when the patient is admittedly mentally unwell. Or a child. Belgium legalized euthanasia in 2002. 3 years ago, they extended the right to die to terminally ill children. And nearby in the Netherlands, the Dutch Pediatrics Association is calling for lawmakers there to eliminate the minimum age requirement for assisted suicide. Currently, you have to be at least 12. But here in America, apparently, we're not even supposed to call it suicide. The word, it seems, makes some people feel oogie. The Associated Press Style Guide, which is an influential guide to how the media reports the news, recommends avoiding the term committed suicide unless quoting a member of law enforcement. It implies that somebody's done something wrong. There is a negative connotation to the word suicide. Health officials can still involuntarily hospitalize someone for treatment, a suicidal person for treatment. But there is a drive in our culture to make some types of suicide acceptable. We saw this in the way the media reported the case of Brittany Maynard last year, attractive young woman who suffered a tragic and very aggressive brain tumor, took advantage of the right to die law in Oregon to end her own life before she died naturally. And we see this in the way media chooses to report other stories. For example, the transgender issue, adopting an individual's preferred pronoun instead of the one dictated by his or her biology. The use of words like partner instead of husband or wife, which apparently are too gender specific to be polite. Or gay instead of homosexual, or which is apparently now considered a slur by some. Pro-choice instead of pro-abortion, or anti-abortion instead of pro-life. Words matter. They affect our perception of stories, perception of concepts and ideas. And in our postmodern culture especially, where feelings are more important than facts or the law, perception is reality. That's why in the assisted suicide agenda, the assisted suicide fight, the Hemlock Society, which is named for the poisonous plant and supports assisted suicide, has evolved into an organization named Compassion and Choices. In China, research into manipulating the human genetic code is the new Wild West. We reported recently that Chinese researchers have become the first to successfully edit the human genome. Scientists there report the Chinese government is spending big money trying to close the gap in biomedical research with the West. Chinese scientists are usually fairly low paid, but they can earn bonuses of more than $30,000 for each article published in an international science journal. This encourages an attitude of do first, talk later. And there are cultural differences, a sort of cultural pride, which geneticists, researchers in China don't want to be dictated to by us in the West. Now, the CRISPR-Cas9 technique, which is powerful, is not yet perfect. The experiment in China that resulted in a change to the human genetic code, the human germline, in other words, it could be transmitted down the generations, failed in 85 embryos before it succeeded. And even when the desired change occurs, the editing technique may cause other undetected, undesired changes to DNA. And the frightening aspect of this research is that one doesn't need a sophisticated lab in order to play with the genetic code. You can buy a complete CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing kit for over the internet for as little as a few $100s. And why not? If you start with the assumption that there is no God, that we are simply the result of billions of years and chance, then we are simply exercising our moral right, our moral imperative to ensure the survival of humanity by improving on the design. And of course, not to mention fulfilling the old promise that ye shall be as gods. And because of the implications of this gene editing technology, I want to apologize for a story that I included on Wednesday as almost a throwaway. I joked about researchers in South Korea working with pig DNA to create a super-muscled, double-muscled hog. My first and only thought, to be honest, about that story was, oh boy, more bacon. First, as I mentioned, the gene editing technique isn't precise. In my opinion, we're like children playing with power tools. We can see that it does some really cool stuff, but we don't see everything that it does. And we're not entirely sure how to use it, and we're sure not using proper safety protocols. But second, after talking with some here in the office who are better informed on the subject of animal welfare than I am, it became obvious to me that I hadn't considered the potential suffering inflicted on pigs whose genetic code has been tinkered with in a laboratory. They may in fact suffer unnecessarily due to unplanned, unexpected genetic changes. So I apologize for that story, and I'll try to be more thoughtful in reporting on issues like this, especially if I'm trying to go for a laugh. Genetics was a big part of the discussion this week on SkyWatch TV as Dr. Michael Lake talked with Tom Horn, part 2 of a 3-part interview about his book, The Shinar Directive, Preparing the Way for the Son of Perdition. If you missed it on the Christian Television Network Tuesday night, you can now watch it on demand. It is at our YouTube channel and available also at our SkyWatch TV Roku channel. If you have a Roku account, a great way to catch up on programs here, but also from some other wonderful ministries like our friends at Prophecy Watchers. Just log on to your account if you haven't added our channel yet. Do a search for SkyWatch TV in the Roku channel store, or log on to skywatchtv.com. And we've got instructions posted there and how you can add our Roku channel to your account. We appreciate your comments, your suggestions, and questions. I get to them as quickly as I can. I appreciate them and appreciate you watching. Send your email to me at dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. And this weekend, as we celebrate our nation's independence, have a blessed weekend, have a safe weekend, and thank you for watching. As we keep watch, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.